Hello, and that is right. Synology is doing their annual conference, and in just a week's time, Synology 2023 and beyond has now been announced, taking place on the 27th of October, a Thursday if you didn't already look that up. But this event is going to be another online event, much like it's been for the last few years, arguably since the pandemic took its toll and working practices and stuff like that changed. This big event is going to be taking place online. Now, bear in mind, we still don't completely know how it's going to be delivered. Now, it could be one big live conference event that cuts back and forth to pre-recorded stuff there, where there's the big keynote speech at the beginning that talks about what they've achieved in 12 months, and then breaks down into what they plan to do, and then after that into lots of subcategories where they start talking about all of their featured solutions in both software and hardware, and then really drills down into those specifics there. Now, that might be the case because last week, or at least at the time of recording earlier this week I should say, there was the big event over for the Synology conference in Taipei, but they covered a lot of information there, not unlike this. Now, that could be the format it takes. However, the last couple of years, it has been delivered, for the most part, as a series of YouTube videos. Again, one big YouTube video and then individual videos for each of those categories. Now, given they did that big conference a few days ago in Taipei, I'm sort of inclined to think and hope it's going to be that first version. It's a lot more like what they're used to in a big Apple-esque presentation there. Now, again, hopefully on screen, the timings are there for you to see. And again, do kind of really examine those for yourself, because you may have to factor in daylight savings where you are, or summertime for individual regions. So although they're there for guidance, maybe double check that I'm not an hour on or hour off depending on where you are. I've had to really knock that together very generally. But that's really it for that event. Of course, I will be covering it a lot more. I'll be doing a wrap-up afterwards of the key highlights for you, hopefully in video and written form, as well as anything that's of particular interest drilling down into. So do stay tuned for that next week. But at this point of the video, what I'm going to do is switch over into predictions, because I do think that is what we need to talk about. Myself and Eddie the Web Guy have made a couple of videos this year talking about Synology's 2023 hardware and software. More about hardware, for honest, and a lot of that has come down to two main factors. One, it's been information that we've been sent or found online. Two, it is predictions based on structure of that portfolio. Many of those predictions came true and some of them didn't. So from this point, let's kind of predict a little bit. Let's work together and figure out what we think is going to be featured at the Synology 2023 event. Again, the bulk of this is prediction led, but most of these are based on real things that we have found information about. It's just whether it's going to make it into that conference. So the first ones obviously are going to be that key mid-range hardware. We fully expect Synology to do a lot of coverage of a lot of their software. They tend to really 85% focus on software and application focus and innovations within that in these annual events, but hardware does play its part. In terms of hardware, I think we're definitely going to hear about the router, that router that we talked about already on the channel a little while ago there, the new Wi-Fi 6 router that they were working on the WRX560. On top of that, I think this might be the first time we're going to hear about the likes of the 23 Plus series. We already talked around about a week and a half ago about some information that was found via sources on Reddit regarding the DS723 that was arriving with that Ryzen R1600 embedded processor, that dual core there. Now, I think we're either going to see formal announcement of that, or probably the DS923 more realistically, because that is always going to be a flagship box. So although they might only sparingly mention it, I would not be surprised if this is where we finally see the DS923 actually get shown off and confirm whether it is going to be like-minded to that hardware architecture of the 1522 or not. Next up, other things I think will make a reference, because it's a lot more business-led. I think we'll finally see a lot more formal reveal of the SA6400 and SA6200. These are AMD EPYC architecture boxes. Now, they've moved away from the Intel architecture of the previous SA generation. We've already found a lot of information on this via a lot of official download pages and official product pages that have floated around online. So I think more than likely this is going to be the point where they will introduce these AMD SAS-based boxes. On top of that, thanks to a conference that took place earlier this week at the time of recording, over in Taiwan, a live in-person event. We learned more about the surveillance aspirations of Synology there, with the introduction of the BC500 and TC500 Synology branded cameras. One was a dome, one was a bullet cam there. I would not be surprised if these make it into the Synology 2023 event as well, because even though they are slated for an H1 or the first half of 2023, if they're going to mention it in that event, they're almost certainly going to mention it in this one. The last thing when it comes to things I'm moderately confident about, I reckon we might see the introduction of a value series NAS here. Now, we're already like 99.9999% certain the CPU inside that is going to be the Realtek RTD 1619 processor there. And again, maybe I'll be wrong, but I'll be honest, there's a million indications online, official and non-official. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is where we see the introduction of either the 2-bay, the 4-bay, or a J series, or maybe even all three. And we have talked about this on both of our previous 2023 hardware prediction and confirmations videos already. So these are products that have existed in one shape or form online via little tidbits online for quite a long time. So I think this would be a very good time for them to at least acknowledge that they're going to exist and follow up the 2018 series, or at the very least formally announce them. Now, in terms of software, I think we are certainly going to see, as they've done for the last 2 or 3 years, more and more mention of Mac support. It's always been a real weakness in their setup there with regards to a lot of those active backups for the applications, Synology Drive. Windows support has always come not only first, but far more readily. Whereas Mac support has taken a lot more time. And a lot of that is to do with integrating the Apple system and working with Apple in a way that Microsoft fall over themselves to provide. And I do think we're finally going to see far more established and probably more concise timelines for things like supporting active backup for system-wide backup operations, but also driving and things like file pinning and more, which have only slowly been integrated in a less a conclusive way than they have been on Mac thus far. And they have mentioned this in a couple of different big annual events, and we've still not seen that full integration take place. The next thing is VM integration on the whole, because Synology Virtual Machine Manager year on year has seen big updates with regards to restoration and synchronization with that hybrid C2 cloud stuff, something else that I think we will see innovation within. But the other thing, alongside the mention of those cameras, the BC500 and the TC500, I do think we're going to see improvements in the surveillance platform. Now, what I mean by that is, for a long time, as good as Surveillance Station is, and particularly version 9 and the way it's been improved upon, its peak features have only ever been enjoyed by the AI-led systems, the DVA 1622 and the DVA 3221, or the 3219 if you had the first gen. All of those AI operations, deep video analysis and AI recognition have been limited to just those systems. But when the DVA 1622 arrived with no GPU on board, but taking advantage of its own onboard hardware, that opens the door to them being able to include a lot of those features on these other systems. Now, whether they lock these to using the Synology branded cameras, so then it's client-side hardware integration from those cameras, and therefore buying those cameras means you can use the AI services in Surveillance Station generally, who knows? But I think it would be incredibly unlikely for them to not show off even more innovations in Surveillance Station at this event. Again, I think we will see a lot more feature in the cloud and that synchronized cloud behavior and integration, then hopefully some sort of plan to make it a lot more accessible to mid-level users, because it's still not quite there, I think, outside of enterprise and particularly high business, but it's getting better all the time. Now, let's go with the out there things. Now, these, again, are all things that I found breadcrumbs or have been highlighted by others, breadcrumbs online, but far, far less tangible than all the products I've talked about thus far. So the first one is a new 8-bay 10 GBE, the DS1823XS. Very little of this online, but certainly fragments of information along those lines online. I don't think that would be shown off. If it is, that would really surprise me. I want it to be, but I don't think it will. Next one is a new 4-bay rack mount, the RS1623XS. Another one, and again, all of this is linked in the description along with information on sources of where this was found. Should be linked in the description below along with the mega thread that's been regularly updated. That little 4-bay, a little 4-bay 1U rack mount follow up to the RS1619XS. Again, whether that makes the cut, I'm not sure. And finally, we can talk about hard drives. Again, it's the way Synology's model's going. I still think it is not outside the realms of possibility. We're going to see Synology standard class hard drives, and if it does arrive, probably 2023 is probably where it's going to be. If we are inevitably going to see a 23 plus generation of systems, I think now would be the time that Synology would unveil a value class series of drives. I've got zero confirmation that is going to happen, but I have found fragments online that would suggest that such a thing, you know, looks like it might exist. Apart from that, it would be great if they did a Switch. I've got no information on a Switch. I wish they did. There was that SG-1000 thing, but no. I'd love it if they released a Switch. I still don't think they're going to do it. I wish they would. But that's really it for predictions and information thus far. I know it's been a long video, and I hope if you came for the beginning of the video and that event, we will be covering it in greater detail after the event with kind of giving you the bite highlights of what to take from that. So do stay tuned for that and subscribe. And of course, we will detail all the stuff in the description and create more articles covering those highlights of the covered content from Synology. But apart from that, have a great week. Stay tuned for that next week, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it then. Other than that, I will see you next time.